Okay, so the first thing we didn't talk about was the file handling. So there's several ones you should be aware of. One is new, and then we have the two saves. There's a save and then a save as. I think most of you are probably familiar with that. And then, of course, the open. So we can find those either in the application menu. There's your new, open, and then the two types of saves. And then you also have them up here in the quick access toolbar. New, open, save, and save as. So basically, when you begin a new drawing in AutoCAD, you don't really even need to go through the new command. You can just click on a tab and it automatically generates a new drawing for you. But if you do use the new command, there are some things about it that are kind of neat. So for instance, if I go up to the new command here, it'll open up this dialog box. And what it asks me to do is select a template. So a template is basically a drawing file. Even though it's named a DWT, it's just strictly a DWG file. So it just kind of opens that file up, and then that's the one you're working on. And inside of that template, you can have inserted all kinds of information. So if you've got a company that you're working for and you've got title blocks and those kind of things that you use, you can find a template or create a template so that a CAD operator doesn't have to reinvent that every time they start a drawing. So like our limits can be set, our title blocks set, all that kind of stuff. And it's just a time-saving device. And it's also a way of creating a standard that everybody uses in the company. Now they have some like example templates down here. So there's a couple of them, like for instance, if you go to the tutorial architectural, I'm not going to open this. You can if you want to play with this, but what this allows you to do then is you'll see there's a title block that comes in, and well, actually, I'll just go ahead and open it real quick. So if I do that, this actually has a title block already pre-inserted that I can utilize. I can just click on the stuff to edit it, so I don't have to deal with that every time. So one of the things about that template, the template that's the current template that you should be using, or what we might call like out of the box in AutoCAD, is what's called the DWT or the ACAD DWT here. So that's the standard template. So when you click over on that button right there, that's what you're getting is the AutoCAD DWT, unless you've selected one of these other ones. Okay. So we don't use this too often, but like I said, a company might, because they can force standards that way. All right, so if you have an existing drawing, this is where you can go to the open command. And a couple things just to everybody's aware of that. You definitely don't want to click on a file name and launch AutoCAD from the file. You usually want to open up AutoCAD first and then launch it through AutoCAD. There's a bit of a difference in the way Windows looks at it. And Windows and AutoCAD both really don't like you doing it that way. So for instance, if you have your flash drive, you stick your flash drive in, you click on your flash drive, you find your files to open. That's probably not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is open up AutoCAD, go to the open command, and then you find the file that you want to work on. So for instance, this will take me to directories. So I can search through, I can, like say, I go to my desktop. On my desktop, I have, let's say, folders out there. So I might have a folder. Well, let's see, I should have a folder for you guys here. There's your EVT. So I would go to the EVT folder, find the one that I've got, and then whatever lab I'm working on. And so let's say there's the one I want to open up right there. So it'll show me, when I find the file, it'll show me what's called a thumbnail over here. And understand this is actually just a snapshot of this file. It's not actually opening the file. Okay, so that's one thing that's important. When you open this, you have several different ways of opening it. Over here, if you notice, you can open it as a completely unrestricted drawing. If you open this up, then you can open it up as what we call read-only. So read-only will allow you to edit it and make changes to it, but when you try to save it, it won't let you save it. So you cannot save it to the file that you're opening. Okay, so that's kind of a way of creating a file that you don't want to screw up. You can open it as a read-only. Even though you're editing it, you won't be able to save those changes until you save it to a new name. You can also do what's called a partial open or a partial open read-only. So if you have a huge file, you don't necessarily want to open that whole entire file up in AutoCAD because it can really slow the whole process down. So you can do a partial open and just open up the pieces that you want. So that's kind of cool. If you try to open up this file, if I open up this file once and then I open up a second time, the second drawing will be a read-only automatically because you can only have one actually active open file at a time. So it is possible to open it up twice, but one will be read-only and one will be active. The other types of file types you can open up, if we go down here, you can open up a DWG, which is what we would normally be looking at. We could open up a standards or a DWT. So these are all pretty much equivalent drawings. The one that's a little different is this guy called a DXF. And a DXF is a drawing interchange file format drawing. So what this is a file that may have been created, like say by another version of CAD that AutoCAD can't open, but you can save your drawing as a DXF and then open it up in other CAD files. So it's basically a translation, and it's not necessarily a one-to-one translation. So you're familiar, like if you took a book and translated it from German into English, it's not going to be the exact book because there's always something lost in translation. And that kind of works the same way when you create DXF files. But these guys are pretty important to understand because you can utilize them for a lot of different things. So it does allow you to open up a DXF. So essentially the only thing you can open, DWG or drawing standards or template, which are basically all DWGs, and a DXF. So if I just choose open here, that's my file that's open. Now, if I do open this again, I'm going to open it again. Let's see if it'll let me do that. It's going to tell me, well, that's already checked out. If you open it up, it's going to be read-only. So actually, I have two versions here, see? And you notice the one says it's locked, and the other one isn't. So if I try to make a change to this or save it, it won't let me. Okay, so that's how open works. And again, when you guys are working, my suggestion is don't open up off, or even at home, don't open it off your flash drive. Copy it to your hard drive somewhere. Create a folder for your files. Dump everything into that folder and open up AutoCAD first, and then open it through AutoCAD instead of double clicking the file. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, so then when we go to save, all right, there's two save options. Actually, there's three. One of them's undocumented, but it's not that big of a deal. If this drawing actually has a name here, if I go up here and do this, this is actually not the save command. It's actually called the QSave command. You can notice up there it says QSave. That stands for quick save. So if I quick save it, notice it just saves it. It doesn't ask me any questions. It just saves it to that same name and the same location that I'm working under. Okay. If you go up to this one, which is save as, what this allows me to do is several things. I can save it to a new location, I can save it with a new file name, and I can save it with a new file type. And this is important because if you're working with someone, let's say that is on release 16, and you're working in release 20 or 21, a person is not going to be able to open up your drawing on release 16 because it can't read a 20 file. So what you can do is save your file down to either, let's say, a 13. Well, actually, I think a 16 will work. But if you were, let's say, we're going to make, say, release 2012, it wouldn't read it. So I could save it down to either like a 13 or a 10 or something. I can save it to another version, and it'll allow it to open up. The only downside to that is if there's an object that exists in release 20 that 13 can't read, you're either going to lose that object or it's going to translate it into some other type of object. So again, it's not perfect. Then you have all these DXF options down here. So you can also create DXF files through the save as. Okay. So be also aware as if you change the name and the location of the file you're currently working on, that is going to be the file that you're currently working on then. So like right now, I'm working on a drawing called Master Lab 1. If I change the name here to just, let's see, just call it Master, that's now the file I'm actually working on. So notice it's no longer Master Lab 1, it's Master. So be aware of that. So if you are saving and you do a save as to your flash drive, you're going to be working off your flash drive, and that's just as bad as opening it from your flash drive, okay? So always try to save to your hard drive and then copy. That's going to be your best bet. Any questions on those, guys? Right there?
Can you trust that stuff like limits are going to be preserved? I mean, would you generally try to save something to a compatibility version and see what you get, or would you say that it's not worth it often?
It's not worth it. I'll guarantee you, you're probably going to save 95% of your drawing, not a problem. There hasn't been too many new things that have occurred that you're going to be utilizing that it's not going to translate down. So I don't really have problems like that. However, if I'm using another program like, say, Civil 3D, that guy's a whole different animal, and he has objects that AutoCAD can't read. So if I do a save in Civil 3D, open it up in AutoCAD, it really does lose a lot, or it just, AutoCAD will open it, but it really either converts it to some other kind of lesser object, or it just doesn't, it can't display it even. So you really won't have problems, Nate, most of the time. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but if I like were to, you can get like extra objects and stuff, right? You can get add-ons and stuff.
So you mean add-ons to like AutoCAD?
Yeah, like if I wanted to mess around with like a landscape kind of thing.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that might get lost in translation. That's why I was saying Civil
Okay. Yeah.
3D. Civil 3D is like I'm talking about. That's kind of like what you might call an add-on. Okay. It creates all these different types of objects that AutoCAD can open, but it really can't handle them the same way it does in Civil 3D. And then there are some things that you'll just lose. They just disappear. So it's probably not preferable to do that, but you can. It's not that big of a deal typically. So that might be a case where DXF works for you pretty effectively. DXF might convert it for you to something that AutoCAD can handle and can read. Okay, much better. So, okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Okay, awesome.
I had a question
Yep.
also.
Yep.
Is it okay to save directly to your flash drive when you're working at school when we're doing stuff in class, or should we save it to that computer and then copy it on our flash drive to keep on working on it at home?
It's truly better, Nora, to save it to the hard drive because
Okay.
Windows doesn't actually like you doing that. Okay.
Okay.
And neither does AutoCAD. And what it actually does is once you start working off of that drive, it actually slows it down because there's a transfer file stuff going on, and it just slows things down all across the board.
Okay.
Also, and I'll tell you this, we just experienced this the other day. One of my students was in another lab doing this in another class, and he was saving his flash drive. And actually his flash drive, I think it must have some corruption in it or something. So when he saved the file, it actually kind of corrupted the file a little bit. So when he was having problems, he brought it up to me. We opened it up. I actually had to do what's called a drawing recovery to fix it because there were just some weird things in it that AutoCAD didn't like. So you can do what's called a recovery to fix it, but that can happen due to doing saving to your flash drive. So yeah, you're always better off create a point. I think at school it just dumps it in my documents, and then or you could literally create a folder anywhere and just dump it in there, and then just copy it. That's your best bet. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guilty of doing exactly what you're saying. I do that all the time. I really shouldn't. I have a big flash drive. I have a hard drive that's external, so I kind of use it like a hard drive, but it's a little bit different than a flash drive, so it's a lot more stable. Okay, definitely. So let me show you one more other thing before we move on to zooms. If you just begin a brand new drawing and you've never, whoops. Yeah, see what's happened when I didn't, when I went to that new command, I set the DWT up to that, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to make that the, all right, let's see what happens now. All right, so I'm going to open up a brand new drawing, and I've never saved this drawing. It just thinks it's generically drawing number whatever. So when I come up here to do a quick save, notice it doesn't do a quick save. It automatically takes me to a save as. So the first time you ever do a save, you're going to get a save as no matter which save you use, because you have to give it a name and you have to give it a location. Okay, so it always does the quick save first, and then from that point on, once you've established the name, then what you want to do is just get in the habit of just clicking that little guy up there real quick, you know, like every 5 minutes or something like that. Okay, and also every time you save, you're also creating a backup. So the backup is always one generation removed from the actual drawing. Okay, any questions? All right, let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at zooms then. So zooming and panning are two big things in AutoCAD, and probably most of you guys have figured out how to do that. What you might want to do, if you have a drawing available, like your first drawing, you might want to go ahead and open that first drawing up. Or if you don't have that drawing, just put some objects down, maybe a rectangle and a circle, so that you can see something going on. Okay, so we're going to go through the zoom options. So there's a couple of different ways to zoom, and actually it has a whole lot of sub options within it. Most of you have probably stumbled on it. I think we've all kind of talked about it already, that the middle mouse key functions as a zoom. So if you roll the wheel away from you, it zooms what we call zoom in. So what it's doing is it's increasing magnification. So all I'm doing is just taking that wheel and rolling it towards the screen. When I roll it towards me, it zooms out. Okay, so this is a zoom out, this is a zoom in. Increase magnification, decrease magnification. Okay, so that's what's referred to as an IntelliZoom in AutoCAD. So it's not functionally the same thing as their zoom commands, but it does work. The other thing you can do with that middle mouse key is you can do what's called a pan. And so if you want to move the drawing left, right, or up, down, you can just hold that middle mouse key down, and then you just sweep it left, or you sweep it right, sweep it up, sweep it down. Okay, so the pan typically is not going to do a magnification change. I mean, you can do that with the wheel. If you hold it down and roll it at the same time, you can make it look like it's doing both, but technically a pan is separate. Okay, and a pan also doesn't change your coordinates. That's the one thing to understand. Notice my UCS right there, it stays right with that drawing. So I'm not really changing my coordinates at all, but it's just where my eyes are looking. So my eyes are no longer looking in the positive realm. They're now looking over here in the negative realm. Okay, so we're going to talk about a command today that's called move, and it will actually pick up an object and move it. So it's going to translate coordinates as opposed to what we just did, which is just a pan. Okay, so a zoom increases or decreases magnification. A pan is just kind of sweeping it left or right, and it gets the term from like a panoramic view that you're just moving, like a camera on a tripod kind of concept. Okay, so let's we're going to go into the zoom commands, and we're just going to type them in. There's a couple of places you can find them on the menus, but it's so much easier to type. And the alias for zoom is just Z. So if you would just type in Z and hit enter, you could pull it up. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to type in Z at the command line and hit enter, and it brings me up to my zooms. Okay. So at the bottom, we'll see there's quite a few different zooms here. Zoom all, zoom center, dynamic, extents, previous, scale, window, object, or what's called real time, which is the default. So we're going to take a look at the all and the extents first, just to give you the idea. Okay, so the zoom all is a great one because what it'll do is usually give you the largest picture that you can get with all your objects. So for instance, if I'm zoomed out like that and I hit zoom all, it grabs that and just displays all of my objects and fits them on the screen. Okay, and if you're trying that at home, hopefully it's doing the same thing for you. Now here's what it really does, and you have to be aware of this. The zoom all looks at your objects, your extents, and it looks at your limits, and it displays them both at the same time. Well, as long as my limits and my objects are sitting on top of each other, then my zoom all is going to give me a really good picture. But if my limits are set differently than where my object is, you're going to get a completely different picture. So watch what happens here. Now I'm doing a zoom, enter, and then all, okay? So my limits right now are pretty much set coincident with my objects, or what we would call my extents. Now I'm going to change that a minute. I'm going to go into limits, and I'm going to pick my lower left corner there and my upper right there, okay? All right, so now I'm going to do a zoom all and watch what happens. Okay, so you'll notice there's my extents sitting over here. Whoops. There's my extents. My limits are over here. So what this thing is displaying for me is a lot of dead space. Okay. So zoom all can bite you if you've got limits set really, really small in one location and all of your extents are in the other. Now I will tell you this, mappers, we work in really large coordinates. It's not unusual to have coordinates that are 1 million, 1 million, or 10,000 by 100,000 or something like that. And if you don't go in and bother to do your extents, what'll happen is when you might have your extents over here at 0, 0, 10, 10 or something like that. When you do a zoom all, what you get is a little dot, and your picture's sitting over here in this little dot. So in that case, you wouldn't want to do a zoom all, okay? So as long as your limits are set good, you're okay. So the other type of zoom, which truly is a good one, is zoom extents. So if we look at zoom extents, what this will do is it just look strictly at your objects, okay? So your objects are, remember, extents is kind of like a box that comfortably fits around your objects. So what that's going to do is display those for you. So if I type in Z enter and then E enter for extents, notice that gives me back. So it ignores the limits, okay? It has nothing to do with the limits. Now this one can be a problem too. Watch what happens here. If I have some little object out here that I don't even really know exists, so let's say I'm getting over here and I'm zooming in and I'm zooming out, and then I do a zoom extents, you can see that was a problem too, because it's looking at those objects over here and it's looking at that guy. That's also a good way to determine whether you have objects that don't belong. So like in that case, I'll just go out, delete what I don't need, zoom extents, and I'm back in business, okay? So just remember the difference. Zoom all looks at limits and extents, and then you have zoom extents. Okay, let's look at a couple other ones here. If you type in Z and hit enter, we have this guy called scale. So scale's kind of cool. You can actually use 3 options on it. You can type in a number of magnification, such as 2, which means 2 times the limits, or you can type in 2x, which would mean 2 times the current display, or you can type in what's called 2xp, and that would be a magnification times paper space. So the XP option only works when you're in layouts, and we're not going to mess with that. Let me set my limits back to where they should be to show you how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, set my limits back to there and there. So now my limits are coincident with that. Okay, so I'm going to do a zoom and I'm going to do a scale. Now you don't actually have to choose the option, because if you type in a number here, it knows exactly what you're talking about by magnification. So I'm just going to type in 2 and hit enter. And notice what it did is it zoomed in 2 times the limits, okay? Now since the limits is a fixed quantity, 2 times the limits has already hit it. So if I go into zoom and type in 2 again, you'll notice there's no change, because it's already at 2 times the limits. If I want to go the opposite direction, I would type in, say, 0.5. That would be half of the size of the limits. Okay. So I don't use that option too much because it's really based on that fixed quantity of limits, and it doesn't mean a whole lot to me. But I do like to use times the current display. So think of this as a ratio or a percentage of what your screen is. So if I want to go 2 times the current display, I would type in 2x. Okay, so that looks very similar to the limits zoom, but I can do it again. Zoom 2x, because every time I'm zooming it, the current display is changing. Zoom 5x. And I can go the other way. Zoom 0.5x. Zoom 0.25x. So that's a really nice little option, okay, to use. I use that more than I use the limit zoom. All right. Let's go ahead and we'll do a zoom extents, take her back. All right. Let's take a look at windows. Okay. Zoom window is a good way of zoom. Go ahead.
What was the XP thing?
Okay, the XP won't work in here for one because we are in what's called model space. Okay. So when you go into this thing called layouts or paper space, what that allows you to do is open up what's called a viewport, and then you can zoom your model in at a particular scale. So I can have the same model zoomed in at different scale factors. Okay, that's what that's really cool about.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're not using it. It's not relevant to anything. In fact, if I tried, watch what happens if I try to do that. If I try to do a 2XP, it'll tell me, oh, it did work. Okay. I guess it just ignores the fact that it's an XP option, but it doesn't mean anything in terms of the fact that it's just based on this viewport itself. But that's used primarily when you get into what are called layouts. I'm surprised that did work. So they must have changed that. It used to be it would tell you it couldn't work. Okay. We're not going to do much with paper space, but later on, if you guys get into AutoCAD a little bit more, paper space is actually the way most people plot. That way you don't have to have title blocks and all that stuff in your model. You can keep everything separate. Okay. Does that explain it?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sure. All right. So let's look at the zoom window option. So with the zoom window, you don't, again, it's just like scale. You don't actually have to select it. It's automatically there. What you're going to do, though, is you're going to pick 2 points like you would a rectangle, like a lower left and an upper right. And the size of that rectangle is going to determine how much you zoom in. Now, that's the other thing. With a zoom window, you can only zoom in. You cannot zoom out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this point right here, and then I'm going to pick that point right there. And that created the zoom magnification. If I do it again, zoom, pick a point, it zoomed in, zoom, pick a point, and pick a point. So it's great for zooming in, and you can get real specific on where you want to zoom in, but you can only zoom in. So if I want to zoom out, it's where I could use my mouse wheel to go backwards, or I could use one of the other zooms. Your mouse wheel is going to be really convenient for zooming, so a lot of people may not even use a lot of these zooms anymore because they're just, other than maybe the zoom extents and the zoom all, those are really useful. All right, let's go ahead. We'll go back. I'm going to do a zoom extents, Z enter, E enter. Okay, those are also good ones to remember, just like Z enter, E enter. Those are real quick aliases. All right, this one that's called object, this is a really cool one. This allows you to select an object or a group of objects, and basically it's going to zoom into those objects. So it's almost like you're doing a zoom extents based on those objects, and it's ignoring all the other objects. So if I do a zoom object, I can pick that object, and then hit enter. And it zooms in, notice, right to those objects. So it'll fill the screen based on those. That's a hugely convenient, and if you do work in paper space, that's one that's really useful because you can zoom the objects in your viewport windows just based on what you select. Okay, so you guys get the idea on how that one works? That one's pretty neat. Any questions? Okay, zoom extents. All right, let's do a look at a couple more zooms here. There's this one called previous. Okay, so every time you're zooming, what's happening is it's remembering this in what's called a zoom buffer. And so every zoom I've been doing is just being remembered. So it just kind of plays it backwards in time. So I can just hit previous and then do it again, zoom previous. So all it's doing is it's just going backwards. And I think it stores 20 zooms in the buffer. And once you've exceeded the 20 zooms, then you've cleared it out. There'd be no more to go back. It's not very convenient to use for me. I think you find that the mouse wheel is just as convenient as anything anymore. So I don't use that previous too often. Just, you know, so that's just kind of me, but I think it depends on what you get into. All right, questions? All right, let's take a look at one more zoom. Then I'm going to show you a couple of pans, and then we're going to move on to what we really want to get into today. The zoom real time. So if I zoom real time, all I have to do is hit enter. So this zoom, notice your cursor becomes a magnifying glass. And the way this works is if you want to zoom in, you take your magnifying glass to the bottom of the screen, you hold it down, and you drag it to the top. That's a zoom in. If you want to zoom out, you take your magnifying to the top, hold the left click down, and then just drag it. So it's kind of just like a drag. Doing left or right does nothing, essentially. So it's either top, bottom, bottom, top kind of thing. If you right click, you'll get these shortcuts that'll show up. So you can do a zoom window, zoom original, or zoom extents, which is pretty convenient. So if I just click zoom extents, it takes me there. Right click, I can do zoom original, which is the original zoom I was in when I entered the real time. Or I can do a window, which I right click. This one's a little different. When you do a zoom window in the real time, you have to click, hold, and then release. Okay, so it's a click, hold, and release instead of 2 picks. So it's a little different. I don't use the real time all that much. But again, you guys got so many different options there. You can use whatever you like the best. So to get out of this, all you have to do is either hit the escape key, or you can right click and then there's an exit. Okay, so you can go either way. All right, so those are zooms. So they have the pan. We already said the middle mouse key works as a pan, or you can just type in P and hit enter. You're in a pan now, and you can just hold the left click, drag it, left click, drag. So this is what's called a real-time pan. This is a little different than using the mouse wheel though, because I don't have to hold the mouse wheel down continually. I'm just panning based on where I want to be. When you're done with this routine, you just hit the escape key, or you can right click and get out. So what's kind of cool, if I'm in a real-time pan, I can right click and go to a real-time zoom, right click and go back to a real-time pan, right click and exit. So there's some neat things in there. Okay. Any questions on the zooms?
Nope.
All right. So what we're going to do, so I want to talk about this section. This is the main thing. We want to start getting into some of this stuff. This is really going to start to take coordinates and all of that stuff that we've been dealing with a lot, this first drawings, and we're going to put more of this work into AutoCAD's hands. So we're going to talk about objects, what an object is, and then building selection sets. And we're going to use these guys called O-snaps. And these are going to be things that are going to harvest coordinates for you from objects that exist on the screen. So you don't any longer have to figure out what coordinate you're at. You're going to let AutoCAD figure it out for you. And then we're going to get into these edit or modify type commands. So we're going to look at erase and oops, undo, redo, move and copy, and fill it. I might skip chamfer today, but I definitely want to go into offset. So these are going to be, these are kind of what I call the workhorses, because these guys you use constantly when you're working in AutoCAD, and they're so important to understand. So let's go ahead and take a look over here. So if you're working in that drawing, I'm going to just close this, and we're just going to kind of put some objects down. So we're just going to be putting stuff that we're not going to be wanting to save. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to put a couple of objects, if you will. I'm just going to draw a couple of lines. I'm going to draw a circle. Don't worry about where they are or what you're. I just want to get a couple of different types of objects. I'm going to put a P line around here. Okay, so we have some objects. Okay, so let's talk about selections. Okay, object selection works two ways in AutoCAD. It either works where what we call noun-verb selection or verb-noun selection. Okay, so noun-verb selection means that you are going to pick the object first, that's your noun, and then you're going to produce some kind of application or operation on it, and that would be typically a modify of some kind. Okay, so like for instance, if I picked that object and then I went up here and said move it from here to here, that's an example of a noun-verb selection. Or I could go into the move command. It asks me to select objects, and then I move it. And that's an example of verb-noun selection. Okay, so technically they do the same thing, but you have more ways of selecting objects when you do verb-noun selection than you do noun-verb. Okay, so let's look at noun-verb selection first. You have three basic methods. You have what's called your pick box, and then you have what's called implied windowing. Okay, so if you're following with me, just take this cursor, make sure that this says nothing down here. Okay, so we're going to make sure that's clean. You might want to hit the escape key just to make sure it's empty. Just take your cursor up here to one of the objects, and when he kind of highlights, just left clicking. And you'll notice that he's now selected. So this is what's called your selection set. Right now I have one object in my selection set. And as I go over here to another object, this is called pick box selection. Okay, so it's nice if you've got just a couple of objects to select, but if you have a gazillion objects to select, you don't want to go out there and select 1,000 objects with your pick box. You'll be there all day and you're going to miss some. So that can be really detrimental to your editing. Okay, so there's better ways. But right now, let's go ahead. We're going to select a couple of objects. And anything that you see highlighted right now is what we call in our selection set. So that means if I say erase or move or copy, these are the objects that are going to respond to that. So if you created one of these in that selection set, but you don't want it in the selection set, you can remove it by holding the Shift key, taking your pick box up to the object that is selected, and then left clicking, and it'll de-highlight it. Okay? So if I highlight it without a shift, it selects. If I shift and then select, it de-highlights it. Okay? So that's what we call pick box selection. Is everybody getting the idea?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a way, instead of doing, manually like putting that in the keyboard, like, is there a way to just deselect it, like by the mouse or something like that?
Let's see. I think you're going to have to use the shift and the pick box if you're doing it this method. There are other methods, but this one, if you're using a strict mouse selection, then that's going to be the best way to do it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if I want to dump my selection set, I can just hit the escape key and that clears everything. Okay. So all I did was hit the escape key. So now if you have a bunch of objects to select, pick box selection is not great. So if you take your pick box outside of an object and you just left click it, what you will do is initiate what's called an implied window. So you'll notice if you drag it to the left, you get a window that looks green and it's dashed. And if you drag it to the right, you'll get a window that looks blue and it's solid. So there's differences in what they're doing. Okay, so the one to the right is called a window selection. And what that does is you have to completely surround the object before it will select. Okay, so notice no matter how I try to select that object, it won't let me because the window wasn't big enough. If I come up here and do it, now I can hit it, okay? If I go with the other type of box, this is called a crossing. This box is really cool, but it can be dangerous because all you have to do is cross through the object to get it. So I don't have to select or surround the whole object. I just have to cross through it. And once I do that, it selects. Okay. So pick nothing and go to the left, you get a crossing. And if you go this way, you get a window. Okay. Is everybody getting the idea how those work? And I think if you hold the shift key, no, it won't work on that case. So that actually doesn't work very well. All right. You guys seen how those work? That's called implied windowing.
Right now I've got some setting on that mine's not making a rectangle. It's making, like, everywhere I move, it curves and it creates a weird shape.
Yeah, you're getting what's called a lasso, and I hate that thing. Okay, here's why you're doing it. You're clicking, right? And then you're holding it down. So you're getting this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, because you're holding your cursor down. Okay, that works the same way, but it's not the same. It doesn't do it as I don't think is friendly. I hate the lasso. So here's what I'm doing differently. I'm just picking one left click and then releasing, and then I just come over here and then I do another left click. Okay. So instead of clicking and holding and dragging, I'm just clicking and then clicking. Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
Got it? Now, let me show you something. If you don't like that lasso, or which I don't like the lasso, and the lasso, by the way, will work either direction. So that can be a window lasso or it can be a crossing lasso. All right. Let's everybody take your cursor up into the graphics screen and right click. You should get this guy right here, and at the bottom you should see options. Is everybody getting options? Go ahead and click options. And across the top you're going to see tabs. We're going to go over to the selection tab. Over here where it says selection modes, you'll notice that there is noun verb selection. If you toggle that off, you're going to be strictly verb noun. So if you like both noun verb and verb noun, you want that on. If you don't want implied windowing, you can turn it off. And if you don't want the lasso, you can turn it off there. If you like the lasso, that's great. Okay. But by default, you're going to get implied windowing, and you're going to get noun verb and verb noun selection, and you're also going to get that lasso. Okay. So if you don't like that, Nathan, just kick him off, and then you won't have to mess with him anymore. I'm not a big fan of it personally. I'll be honest with you. All right, we good?
Yeah.
All right, so with noun verb selection, you're limited to implied windowing and pick box. That's it, okay? I mean, it still gives you a lot of tools, but it doesn't give you as much flexibility. So when we go up here and start using these modify commands, then we can start using verb noun selection. So we're not going to actually do erases, but yeah, let's do an erase. And when you select objects, you can select it with a pick box. You can select it with implied windowing, but you can do other methods, okay? So I'm going to show you a few other ones that are really cool, okay? So we're just going to use move because it looks a little different. So we're not going to do anything to these yet. So just we're going to bail every time when we get some selected. So when I go into move, notice it asks me to select objects. So again, I can use pick box, I can use implied windowing, okay? But they also have some other options. So if you want to force just a window anywhere you want, okay, you can just type in W and hit enter. So that allows me to pick a window that'll go to the left or a window that'll go to the right. So I have more flexibility by doing that. So remember, with implied windowing, you go one way, it's a crossing, and the other way it's a window. All right. So let's go ahead with escape. You can also do the same thing with a crossing. So if I go to move again, this time type in C, what it'll do is allow me to go to the left with a crossing and allow me to go to the right with a crossing until I, so as long as I'm in that option. All right. You guys see how that works? Yeah, they have
Can
a.
you show me one more time?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm in the move command. It asks me to select objects. I'm just going to type in C and hit enter. And I can drag that window any way I want, left or right. Okay? So there's a little bit of a difference in the way it functions. With the implied windowing, if you go left, you're getting a crossing. With right, you're going a window. But with forcing a pure crossing or a pure window, you can go either way. Okay, so that's the only advantage to it. All right. So they also have one that's kind of like a window, but I think it's a little bit friendlier. It's called a window polygon or a crossing polygon. So I'll show you how this works. It's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit better than a lasso. So if you go to move and I type in CP for crossing polygon, what you do is you just pick a bunch of points like you would a polygon and notice what it's doing. It's kind of like that lasso. It's just a little bit, it's more pick than it is holding and dragging. So once you have that where you want it, you can just hit enter and it selects. And I don't use that too much, I'll be honest with you. Okay, so, but here's one that I actually use a lot. And this is called a fence. So a fence is like drawing a line, and whatever the line crosses through, it will select. So think of it like a one-dimensional crossing window. So, but really, it's truly just like drawing lines. So if I go to the move command, type in F for fence, you just pick a point, pick another point, pick another point, and then when you hit enter, it selects whatever that line crossed through. That fence is actually one of my favorite selection tools because it really does a lot of cool stuff. Are you guys picking up on how this is working?
Yeah.
It's going to take you some time, and if you have some questions like on Wednesday, think about it. I can show you how to do this once you get through it. Being honest with you, for small drawings that you guys are using, you're going to be able to get by with the pick box and the implied windowing pretty regularly for most things. But when you start to get into other things, there's things like fence tools, and those are great. They're really great. Okay, go ahead and hit the escape key. Here's a neat one. It's called a last modifier. So if you go into move and it asks you to select objects, if you just type in L and hit enter, it automatically selects an object for you. Does anybody guess what that means? Last. Let me take a guess. If you look at what it's selected, it's the last object that you drew in terms of the time. So I think I drew these lines first, that one, that one, that one, and then the circle, and then I did my polyline last. So what it did is it selected just that last object. So that's kind of cool, because if you go out, you draw a circle, and then you want to move it right away, you can just say move last, and it just selects it. You don't have to select anything. All right. All right, let's do, go ahead and hit the escape key. We're going to take a look at, again, I'm going to do one called all, A-L-L. Now you have to type it in, A-L-L, and hit enter. And this will select every object on your screen. So whether it's visible or invisible or zoomed out or not zoomed out, it's getting everything that you have on your screen. So this one can be dangerous. If you, like, for instance, think you're not getting stuff that I can't see right now, I'm getting everything. So you have to be really careful with it. But the beauty is let's say you want to take your whole drawing and move it from one coordinate system to a new coordinate system. This would be the one I want to use because I want to make sure I get everything and not leave anything behind, because that could be really detrimental, leaving anything behind. Is everybody okay with that? All right, I'm going to go ahead and escape. All right, so when you are doing verb noun selection, which is what we were doing, you always start out in what's called add mode. So what it's doing is it's adding objects to your selection set. You can also remove objects, okay? Now I showed you we can hit the shift key and remove, but when we're doing verb noun, we can do what's called a remove option. So let's go ahead and let's go into the move command and let's just type in the word all and hit enter. So everything should be selected on your screen right now. Now you can still hold the shift key and remove objects, but you can also just type in R and hit enter. And you'll notice by doing that, your screen down here in the command line does no longer say select objects, it says remove objects. So now you can just pick, and I don't have to shift. I can do an implied window, and it's deselecting. So anything that it's hitting, it's now deselecting it. If I want to go back and add objects, I just type in A and hit enter. It brings me back into selecting objects. So now notice my crossing works like a selection tool. When I'm in a remove mode, it works like a remove tool. So you can kind of go both ways. So that the W, the crossing polygons, the window polygons, last, fence, all, none of those work in noun verb selection. They only work when you're using one of these tools up here where it's asking you to select objects. All right, you guys kind of getting the idea? No questions?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay, so those are going to be important as we get into the edits. So those are called selection sets. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what are called object snaps. So object snaps are really going to be really cool tools. By the way, you're probably in a command right now, so let's just go ahead and hit the escape key. So down at the bottom of the screen here, you have this little button right here. These are called object snaps, and the actual name is osnap for the command. So if you open this up, you'll notice there are a group of descriptions there, and these are object snaps that exist that allow you to basically harvest coordinates from objects based on the condition that you have there. So for instance, the top one is called an endpoint osnap. So what that's going to do is harvest the endpoints of, if I touch that line, it's going to grab either that coordinate XYZ or that coordinate XYZ, whichever one I'm closest to. Not all objects have endpoints. So for instance, a circle doesn't have an endpoint, but lines, polylines, arcs, those all have endpoints. And anything that has an endpoint would have a midpoint. So a midpoint would be the middle of this line. Like snap right to the middle of that, or the middle of that vertex, or the middle of an arc. Center will work to the center of a circle, center of an arc, or center of an ellipse. So if I want to find where the center of this circle is, I have no clue where it is, I can snap it. I just select the circle and it'll snap to that point. Node will snap to a point object. So I showed you guys point objects last week, I believe, and that would be what that's snapping to if you use that. Quadrant works with circles and arcs and ellipses. So a quadrant is one of four, well, it's usually four things on it. I'm going to actually show you something here. If I click on this circle, you get a grip there. Those are your quadrants right there. So a circle typically has four quadrants, and it's basically where the x-axis passes through your circle and the y-axis passes through your circle. So if you have an arc, let's say that big, you really would only have one quadrant here, because that may not have a quadrant and that may not have a quadrant. So arcs can have anywhere from, they can have anywhere from 4 quadrants to no quadrants, where a circle will always have 4 quadrants. Also, by the way, want to keep this in mind. Quadrant does not mean the same thing as tangent, okay? Quadrant will only go to one of those four like kind of grid points, but if you pull the line out diagonal, it will no longer be it would no longer be tangent. So there is a tangent snap that's separate, and you can see that down there. That's a tangent snap. We have intersection. Intersection is really cool. You can have objects that intersect, that touch, like that would be an intersection up here. But these two objects actually intersect somewhere out in space. So if I extended that mathematically, it's going to hit this line as long as they're not parallel. So this will work for either case. So that's a really super cool tool. I'm not going to look at all of these, but we'll look at a few more. Perpendicular. We'll snap perpendicular from an object or perpendicular to an object. So that one's kind of neat. And then we have this other guy called nearest. Well, tangent, of course. We're going to look at that one. And then nearest. So nearest just says, I'm going to make sure you snap somewhere on this line, but you don't know exactly where it'll be. So wherever you click your cursor, when you click it, that's what you're going to get. Okay. So notice that if you have these little checks here, those are called running O snaps. So what that means is running O snaps are going to pick up anytime you select an object, it's going to go through that cycle and figure out whether you're talking about, let's say, either an intersection or an endpoint. But it might grab one that you're not really after. So you have to be careful with running O snaps, but that means they're on all the time. Okay. You can also use what's called an overriding O snap. I'm going to show you kind of how to do that. But if you have like your box, we're gonna turn this off. But if you turn this off, if you just click down here, click on it, what that will do is turn it off. So my running O snaps are no longer valid. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to clean my screen up, and I want you guys to kind of draw something similar to mine so we can kind of see how this works. So I'm going to just go ahead and select all of these guys like that, and then I'm going to come up here and hit erase. All right, so let's do a line like this, and we'll do a circle, and we'll do, let's say, maybe a rectangle. So we're going to show you kind of how these work. All right, so take a sec to do that. So here's when you're going to use an O snap. Anytime AutoCAD asks you for a from point or a to point or a base point or a displacement point, anytime it's talking about points of any kind where you would normally pick a coordinate, that's when you want to consider using an O snap. Okay, so we're going to start out in the line command. Make sure that your running O snaps are turned off. Okay, so make sure that's gray, not blue. Okay, we're going to come over here and we're going to hit the line command. So if you come up under this object, it should not pick up any of those green boxes. All right. So what we're going to do is do what's called an overriding O snap. So what I want you to do is hit the Shift key, hold it down, and then right click, and you're going to get your object snap menu to pop up. So what I want you to do is do a midpoint, and then we're going to come up and touch this object, and you can touch that object anywhere, and notice it'll go right to the midpoint. That's what that green symbol is. I don't have to go down there with my cursor, okay? I can touch it up here, and all I have to do then is left click, and it found the coordinates of that point, all right? So now I'm going to do a shift and a right click and go to the center of the circle. So I'm just going to touch the circle, see the center option pop up, left click. Once I see that little symbol, I know I'm good to go. I'm going to do a shift, right click. This time I'm going to go to the end point. And then I'm going to get it and go. And then you can hit escape. So you'll notice that what I'm doing is I'm picking the tool that I want to use when I want to use it. Okay, it's not just popping up for me directly. And what we're doing is what we call an overriding O snap or an override. If you turn this box on, what this will do is allow you to have these guys running for you. So if I toggle on endpoint and midpoint and center, I can do the same thing. So I'm going to turn endpoint, midpoint, center, and get rid of this guy. and then I'm going to turn this on. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get rid of that line and get rid of this line. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go into the line command, touch the line, there's my midpoint, touch the circle, there's my, and then I can either go mid or end point. So the advantage is I don't have to do the shift and the right click, okay? So there's good things and bad things about doing both. And if you have running O-snaps on, if you have running O-snaps, you can also override them. So even though it's trying to go to an endpoint or a midpoint, you can still do an intersection, okay? Everybody okay with that? These are going to be really powerful little guys. We're going to use them a lot, particularly as we draw and also as we do these edits, which we're going to get into here, okay?
Okay. So I did a line, shift right click, got the midpoint of that line.
Yep.
But then did I miss something? I tried shift right click again and I couldn't get the menu up again.
Oh, I'm not sure what happened. It should, anytime you shift right click, it should pop up. Are you sure you're right clicking and not left clicking?
Yeah, pretty sure. It's okay. I'll
try it again. Let's try it again while we're talking. Go into the line command, all right? You there?
Yeah.
Shift right click, you get in your menu?
Hold on, I need to delete this.
Okay.
Okay, line. Midpoint. Okay, I got that.
All right. Now just pull your cursor out. Is your cursor acting like a rubber band?
Yeah.
All right, now do a shift right click and it should pop right back up.
Okay, here we go.
Is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right.
I'm not sure what was going on there, but you know.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. This is going to take you a little getting used to. Okay, it really is. So let me show you some really cool ones. Okay. So I want you to we're going to go ahead and just delete everything we got here. So I'll just go ahead and type in E and hit enter, and then all, and enter twice. That'll take that out. All right. So let's do. I want you to draw a line that's going to come up like this, and another line, but don't make them touch. Okay, but make sure they're not parallel. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to have you draw a circle over here like that. All right. So I think everybody would agree if we extended these lines out far enough, they're going to hit, right? As long as they're not parallel, even if they're only 1 second apart, they're going to hit somewhere out there in space. It might be way, way out there, but they're going to hit. So that's called an intersection. So watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go to the circle command, and it wants me to place a center point. So I'm going to hit shift, right click, intersection, select the first line anywhere, and then select the second line. And when you select the second line, you're going to get that green symbol. Just left click when you see it, and there's your circle. So if I want to make it as big as that endpoint right there, I've got it. So the way I did this, by intersecting these lines using the intersection O-snap, they're not physically intersected, but it found that point for me. Did you guys get that to work?
Yeah.
That's a really, really cool thing right there, okay?
Can you do that one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to undo what I just did, all right? Do you have lines in there like that?
Yeah, I got the
Okay.
lines.
All right, so I'm going to go into the circle,
All right.
and it says specify center point, right?
Right.
So I'm going to shift, right click, there's my menu, find the intersection O-snap, select the first line, select the second line, and there's your point. And then I just drew it down to the end point of that guy right there. Did that work?
All right, sweet.
Yeah, isn't it? It
Yeah.
really is sweet.
Beautiful.
I mean, to think about what that just did for you mathematically, we've just really dumped coordinates out of the whole thing now. Now again, you always are dealing with coordinates, okay? So having coordinate knowledge is important, but O-snaps are just going to give you a whole nother realm of coordinate knowledge. And it's going to let AutoCAD do a lot of that work for you, okay?
Yep.
All right, let's take a look at tangent. So tangent is a really nice one too. I'm going to draw a line tangent from this circle to tangent to that circle. So we're going to go into the line command. Ask me to select the first point. I'm going to do a shift, right click, tangent. Select that circle anywhere, and notice as you pull that line out, wherever you move that line, it follows you around. It knows where your end point is, so it knows where the tangency is looking for. See, it's looking for a tangent point. Everybody see that? So what I'm going to do now is hit shift, right click again, go to tangent. I'm going to select that other circle, and then I'm going to hit escape. So this line is completely tangent to both of those circles by using that tangent spec. I could do the same thing on the other side, line, tangent from you to tangent to you. All right? So these things are incredibly important when it comes to doing any kind of design or any type of higher level type of stuff. So, you know, we're gonna be way less coordinate dependent. I mean, you're still gonna be able to use coordinates anytime you want to, but these guys are gonna harvest coordinates from objects that exist. That's what's really important. Okay. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna show you what's called perpendicular. So this is another important option, is if I want to draw a line perpendicular to this line. So I'm just gonna go into the line command, and I'm going to pick a point out here, okay? So I'm going to shift, right click, perpendicular, select that line anywhere, and then hit enter. That line is now perpendicular or 90 degrees here with that respect to the other one. Okay? Watch what happens when we do perpendicular to a circle. We're going to go line, pick a point out here, and then I'm going to hit shift, right click, perpendicular, select your circle, and it runs it in like that. Does anybody know what this line is doing when it's perpendicular to a circle? What's exactly happening there? If I extend this line through...
The midpoint.
Go ahead.
It's going to pass perpendicular to, it's going to form, it's going to intersect the midpoint.
Well, not the midpoint. You mean center point, right?
The center of the circle.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yes, exactly. So another way of expressing that, we call this very often, what this is referred to as a radial line. So in other words, it's coming out radially from the center point out, okay? So if you want to express something radially to a circle or an arc, snapping perpendicular to it's really kind of a cool thing, okay? So one thing about snaps like over here, right here, I would recommend not having a bunch of them at the same time. I usually don't like maybe more than like 3 or 4 of them running. If you turn a bunch of them on, you get some really, you know, you can get things happening to you that you don't necessarily want happening. So kind of be careful when you use them, okay? They are definitely really powerful. And just remember, if that blue button is on, you've got O-snaps that are running all the time. But you can always override them anytime you want by just hitting the shift and the right click, okay? So that's a really good way of doing it. Overrides and runnings. Everybody good with that? All right, I'm gonna take that as a yes. Okay, so we're gonna start to look at these guys right up here. These tools are called modify tools. And what they do by and large is edit things, okay? So most of the time, these are gonna operate on more than one object. So very often if I select, for instance, rotate, it's going to say select objects. So that means I can select multiple objects. There will be a few of these commands, like down here, that's called break. Let's see if I can find him right there. He will only work on a selected single object. So you can't select multiple objects. So then the only thing you can use is a pick box. So it just depends. This depends on what you select. I think I didn't get break. I think I actually got something different. But anyway, we'll see some of those as we get into that. I think that's join. Anyway, oh, there's break. If I hit break right here, and it's going to ask me to select an object. So I cannot select multiple. So most of the tools we're going to use up here are going to be multiple selections. So we're going to start out with erase and its subset, or its complement, which we call oops. So erase will do exactly what its name implies. If I come up here, hit the erase command, I can select the objects I want to erase, that one, and this one. This one's kind of nice because it kind of highlights the objects as a negative highlight, and it's kind of showing you, well, that's what you're going to erase. So once you've selected those objects and you hit enter, they're gone, okay? Just like that. Are they gone forever? Does anybody know?
No. Could you undo it?
You could, okay. So the answer is yes, Nora. They're not gone forever. You're correct. They exist, but okay. This is where that would change that. If I save this drawing and close the drawing and open it back up, they're gone forever. Okay. So as long as you are in the same drawing session that you started in, you can get them back. Okay. So if I come up here and do this guy right here, that little arrow going left, that's an undo. I can undo that. I can undo the erase and I can bring them back. But if I save the drawing, get out of the drawing and back in, it won't work. Okay, they're gone. So erase has a thing that you can do. Most of it's just you're gonna select the objects and then erase. You could also, let's say I could go in here and do the selection. So if I do a noun verb selection and I come up here, it's not going to give me any choice. Whatever is highlighted there gets selected or gets erased. So sometimes you're better off going into the erase command and then doing it like that, because then you can see what it's going to erase before you do it. So there's kind of a difference. The other kind of neat thing that's neat to know is you can just select the objects here, and then you can come up to the delete key on your keyboard and hit enter, and it'll take them out too. So that's also an erase. So I'll use that quite often. So I don't actually have to get into the command. Okay. So there's really no sub options in this command. It's just select and erase. So let's say you do want to get your command, your objects back, but not use this guy. There's a command out there. It's kind of an older command, but it's called oops. OOPS. There's no other way to get into it. It's not on the menu anywhere. You have to kind of know that it exists, and you have to type it in. So kind of this is how this works. Let's say we erase this circle. So go ahead and select that circle and then just erase him. Okay. And then you come over here and you draw a rectangle and you draw another circle. So let's say you decide, wow, I really want to get that circle back. But if you come up here and you do an undo, you're going to have to undo that circle and then that rectangle and then that before you get it back. Okay? So this is where oops comes in. Oops will work as an undo for the most recent erase. So the one thing about it that's pretty important to understand, it only works once, and it only works with the most recent erase. So follow the same scenario. If I go in and I delete that circle, and then I generate a rectangle and generate a circle, and then I realize, oh yeah, I want to get that circle back, but I don't want to do an undo to get rid of these. You just type in oops, then hit enter, and it brings that circle back for me. So think of what oops is doing. It's undoing an erase. That's exactly what it's doing. And then it only can work one time, and it only works with the most recent erase. So when I say it only works one time, I can go in here and erase that, and then I can do it again now because I have a new I can have a new erase. So if I oops that, I can oops it back. So it'll work one time with the most recent erase. Okay, guys, see how that works? Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is what's called the undo command and the redo command. Okay, so both of them are pretty nice in AutoCAD. I already showed you one way. This guy right here will undo backwards. So here's what's happening is think about everything you're doing in AutoCAD. It's kind of like a list of instructions. I'm going to hit the F2 function key. This is a list of all the instructions that, since I've started AutoCAD, of what I've been doing, and it just remembers it. So it's kind of like a word, it's like a word processor document or something, and it's line by line by line. So when you're undoing is what you're doing is you're going back through that line by line by line by line. By hitting this arrow, you're just doing it one step at a time. So I'm undoing the most recent and then the next most recent. So I'm just going one step at a time. And that's your safest way of doing the undo command. Now next to that, there's a little drop down arrow. If you click that drop down arrow, you'll notice, well, there's a set of instructions. And I can actually do multiple steps at a time. So I can basically undo a whole lot at one time if I'm not careful. Okay. So personally, I like to do undos one step at a time. And let's see, I'm going to redo back. So another way of doing undo is you just type in U at the keyboard. U, enter, U, enter, U, enter. And that's just doing it one step at a time also. Okay. If you type in the word undo, then you get into an undo command, which has sub options. And there's some other cool things in there, but one of the things, notice it says 1 by default. Well, if you type in 20, that takes me back 20 steps. So it kind of does the same thing that this does here. All right, so I'm going to redo that. Oops. All right, so another thing with undo, you can do this thing called undo. They have an undo back. So if you do an undo back, that will actually delete everything that you've drawn in this drawing from the very beginning. So if I do an undo back, you're going to get this message that says, you're about ready to undo everything. Is this what you really want to do? And the default is yes, actually. So if you just hit enter, I'm back to a clean slate. So you got to be really, really careful with that. You're going to do something like that.
That
Okay?
takes you back to the save.
And no, it takes you back to where you started from the very beginning. Like when it takes me back to a clean slate. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just don't know why you'd make that.
Well, you wouldn't want to do it. Okay. You typically wouldn't want to do it. But let me show you something about it that's kind of neat. I'm going to bring this guy back. Here's where this is useful, okay? And why that's kind of in there. All right, well, that's not very much, but let's say right now I have a drawing and I'm pretty confident that what I've got here is going to be good. But I want to start experimenting with some stuff and I'm not sure I'm going to keep it. So what I can do is I can go into undo. I'm going to type in the word undo and notice there's this thing called a mark, okay? So what this mark does is it kind of like places a benchmark at this point. And so I'm going to go experiment. I'm going to draw a circle and I'm going to draw a rectangle. So I'm just trying to figure out, if this is something I really want or not. And if it is, then I'll keep it. And if it's not, then I can dump it. So I get in there and I think, that design just isn't doing what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the undo and I'm going to undo back. And it takes me back to where I placed that little marker, that stop. So you can think of it like a stop, or I think of it like a dam. It won't let you go any further back. That's where undo is a lot more, with undo back, it's a lot more useful. And quite frankly, I don't use it too much, but just so that you know that the option is in there. And also you mentioned, Nathan, I think you mentioned the save. when you do undo backs, it can't undo a save. So if you undo back your drawing and you exit out of it without saving changes, what was saved up to that point will be still saved. But if you save what you have over top of that, then you'll delete it. Okay. So undo can be undone by doing a redo. So a redo is kind of like undoing an undo. And so you can do it one step at a time, or you can do it through that listing. So there's different ways of doing it. At one time in AutoCAD, you only had one redo, but now you have multiple redos depending on what's going on there. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to take a look at move, copy, offset, and fillet, and that should finish us up for the day, and that'll bring us up right where we need to be for our lab. So I want to take a look at move, and I want to show you something with it. Let me go over to here. So move is going to be able to allow you to take an object. Let's say I have an object that I've drawn here, and I'm going to be able to move that object to a new location on the screen. Okay, so it's going to move that thing from there to there like this. Now when it moves it, you'll notice that the orientation of this line and the orientation of that line will be the same. So in other words, if this is 50 degrees with respect to X, when I move it, this will still be 50 degrees with respect to X. So when you do that type of move is technically called a translation. So we are doing what's called translating this object across the screen. And what it basically does is it's taking a vector delta y and a vector delta x, and it's using that amount of delta x and delta y for each coordinate value on that object. Okay. So when you do the move, it will ask you a couple of questions. First, it's going to ask you the objects that you want to move. Okay, so we can select one object. We can select multiple objects. After you select the objects, then it wants to know a base point. So a base point typically is on the object. So I might put my base point here. But I can also put it like midpoint or here, but the base point could actually be out here. So typically it's going to be on the object, but not always. So then the second point is referred to as the displacement point. Okay, so we're going to have a base point to a displacement. So that's the first option. You select the objects, select the base point, then you select the displacement. You can also just do what's called a displacement, which means you know how much you want to move it in X and Y, and that's the difference. So there's two major ways of drawing that they're using this command. So let's go back to AutoCAD here. So I'm going to go ahead and have you guys clean your screen up for me. So I just want to go into the erase command. We're going to do an all, and then hit enter twice. Okay. So we're going to draw a circle down here over in the corner. And we're going to draw a line up here in this corner. And we are going to translate this line from its midpoint to the center point of the circle. Okay? Now again, I can use this either in verb-noun or noun-verb selection. I'm going to pretty much work in terms of verb-noun selection. So what I'm going to do, I want to move this, and there's the move command very conveniently shown to you. And the other thing is it's got a real nice alias, if you remember this. If you just type in the letter M and hit enter, it'll get you to the move command. Okay, so I'm going to go to move, select the object that I want to move. And notice it'll continue to ask me to select objects. So when I'm done, I just hit enter. And now it says specify base point or displacement. So we're going to do a base point move. So what I'm going to do is hit the shift, right click, and I'm going to grab the midpoint. I'm going to come up here. When I see that midpoint symbol, I'm going to left click. You should now notice as you drag this around, it's allowing me to move it wherever I want. You can see what it's doing is it's translating because it's not rotating or changing orientation, okay? So now we need to give it a second point. So I'm going to hit a shift, right click, center, select my circle, and there it is, okay? Did everybody get that to work, or do we need to see it again?
Can you do it one more time?
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you one thing. Move, you're going to use move a lot. So you want to get a handle on it because it's one of those common commands. And it's one that's really, really important. So I'm going to undo what I just did. Okay. I'm going to go to move, select my object. Once I'm done selecting objects, I have to hit enter to terminate the selection process. I'm going to hit enter. And it says, okay, specify base point or displacement. So I'm going to specify a base point by using a nose snap, shift, right click, grab the midpoint, select the object's midpoint, and notice now it's just free to float in a translation mode. So what it really wants to know now is where is your second point? So again, I'm going to use a shift, right click, midpoint. I'm sorry, I should have used center because there is no center point or a midpoint on a circle. So there you go, like that. All right. Did you guys get it to work now?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, that's a really, really, really important kind of thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to translate this, but we're going to use a displacement. So in other words, we're going to say, okay, we know how much in X we want to move it and how much in Y we want to move it, okay? So, and by the way, you don't normally know that. Most of the time, you're probably going to use base point and displacement point. That's you'll probably use that 90% of the time, 80 to 90% of the time, okay? So we're going to do it a secondary method now. So I'm going to go into move. This time I'm going to select both objects, the line and the circle. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is hit enter to terminate my selection set. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to do a displacement, and all I have to do is hit enter, okay? And then you're going to tell it how much you want to move it in X and how much you want to move it in Y. So we're going to type in -10 for the X, comma, 5 for the Y. So it's going to go over 10 to the left, and it's going to go up 5 in the top. So hit enter, and it didn't move it very far, but it actually moved it over and up. So that option, you really don't know as much, okay? But you don't have to use O snaps either. So the one thing about that, the displacement itself, you don't really need an O snap, okay? Did everybody see kind of how that worked? It's not as important to understand that one as the other one because the base point displacement point is used way, way, way more often. Did we get it to work, guys?
Yeah.
Everybody?
Yeah, I got it.
All
Can we
right.
do that one more time?
What's that?
So can we do that one more time?
Sure, absolutely, Nick. So now again, just keep in mind, this one is not very commonly used, okay? So I'm going to go move. I'm going to select my objects. I'm going to hit enter. And since I'm doing a displacement, I just hit enter and tell it how much in X and how much in Y you're going to use. So what you're really typing in is a delta X and a delta Y value. Let's move it a little bit more. So let's say -20 and comma +10, okay? So it went basically over 20 units and up 10. All right, did that work for you now?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. -20, 10. Okay.
It worked?
Yeah.
Okay. Notice also, by the way, there's an X, Y, and a Z displacement. So you can actually move this in X and Y and Z. So you can actually move it off of the plane that you're working into another plane. And so that's true whether you're using base point displacement or if you're using a displacement itself. All right, we good?
Yep.
All right, so related to move is the copy command. Okay. So the copy is just like move in the sense that it's going to translate objects, and it has basically the same options. You can go base point to displacement point, or you can do displacement. The only difference is that it will keep the original object set behind and then just make a copy of it. So notice copy is embedded right under move. And the alias for this is CO, because if you type in C, you're going to get a circle, okay? So aliases are nice to learn. If you can start learning some of those, then it's real simple keystrokes. So I'm going to go here, copy. I'm going to select these objects to copy. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And then notice it says base point or displacement. So I'm going to give it a base point by hitting shift, right click. I'm going to go to the center of the circle. And notice I can then just make a copy here, make a copy here, make a copy here. So I can just keep copying all over until I'm done. I just hit enter and it'll take it out. Okay. So not much to it, but notice all of these lines have the same rotation angle on them because of its translating objects. You can't see that with a circle, but they were staying true too. Okay. It doesn't change. Any questions on that? Nice way of keeping you from drawing things twice. In fact, think about this when you're drawing CAD from now on, what you want to think about. Anytime you're drawing something twice, you're doing it wrong. So what that typically is saying to you, you know, think about using copies or these kind of things, because mirrors, those kind of guys that would allow you to not draw things twice, okay? All right, so I want you to do an undo for me. It should take out all the copies. I'm going to show you a copy with a displacement. Now the difference is on this one, it will only work once. So once you do one displacement copy, it drops out of the command. So I'm going to go into copy, select the objects again, hit enter again for my displacement, and I'm just going to type in 20, comma, -10. And it just makes a copy from this one over 20 and down 10. And notice it also dropped me out of the command. So there's a little bit of a difference. And just like move displacement, you're not going to use copy displacement that much. You're a lot more going to use the displacement base point kind of thing. All right. Any questions on that one? We all good?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you not use copy displacement for part of lab 2?
Well, you could. So in the case where I had that, Nathan, I think I had you guys basically drawing, or, you know, instead of copying, you're still in the, like, you're talking about the donut, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that case, you stay in the donut command. So basically, I'm just using a kind of a displacement option by placing the donut, okay? Well, if you placed one donut and we're out of that command, you could use copy and do this. Yeah, that would work really effectively. You could do that. But I'm going to tell you one thing about it. It's not going to be too effective, because if you're trying to type in the displacement, the minute you type in the displacement, it's going to drop you out of the command. It's only going to let you do it once. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you stay in the donut command, you can do the displacements place within the donut command itself, and it'll let you do it forever. But the copy displacement is only going to work once. So you're going to keep getting in and out of the copy command if you're going to do that. And actually, it would take you a whole lot longer than just placing it. But yeah, the answer is yes. That could be used that way, for sure. Okay, it just wouldn't be efficient. Okay, and efficiency in CAD is one of the things that you want to learn to build your skills on eventually, because that's kind of what makes or breaks CAD people. So if a guy's taking, you know, all day to do what I can do in a half a day, I mean, that's going to catch up to you by the end of the week. Okay, so that's where you get into the efficiency aspect. Okay, questions? Good. That was a good call. A good point. Okay, we're going to look at two more really powerful commands. So move and copy, and then offset and fillet. These guys do so much. It's amazing. So let's go back over to my whiteboard here. I'm going to clean this guy up. I'm going to do a new. So I want to look at offset first. Okay, so offset does exactly what its name implies, but we just did a little bit of instruction about it. So we have the offset command, and the alias on it is O. So this is a nice, convenient command to know. So if you have, let's say, if I draw a line like this, okay, when I use an offset, what offset will allow me to do is give it a distance from that, okay? So I will tell it what distance I want, and then it's going to make a copy of that object. It'll be parallel to that, whatever distance that I tell it to be, okay? So I kind of think if you're doing anything that's got a lot of parallel lines into it, right? Like a floor plan, for instance, or parking lots, anything that's got lots of nice parallel lines, offset's going to be really cool. And we can use the offset to the left, or we use the offset to the right, okay? Each object is going to be different in how it offsets objects, though. So a line is going to offset just like I've drawn it here. Now a polyline, what's really cool about a polyline, as we'll see here, is that when you draw a polyline, when it offsets, it's going to offset kind of like this, so that it does the whole thing. So we're going to show you, I'm going to show you the difference in what a line and a polyline would offset. And so circles are even different. They do what's called a radial offset. So if I offset this circle, what I'm going to get, I hope I can draw this. Whoops, I knew I wasn't going to be able to. Try it. You're going to get a circle inside of another circle or outside of a circle. These two circles are going to be concentric, which means they have the same center point. So the only thing that's changing is the radius of the one, whoops, the radius of the one and the radius of the other, but they come from the same center point. So that's your concentric point right there. So that's your offset. So they have another option that's called through point. So if you don't know this distance here, you don't know that distance, you can just pick a point and it can come through that point. In other words, AutoCAD can calculate the offset distance that it needs, okay? So let's go back to AutoCAD and take a look at this. All right, so what I would like you to do is, let's go ahead and we're gonna clean our screens up. So I'm just gonna type in erase and the word all, enter twice. And I want you to draw a couple objects for me, okay? So we're gonna draw some lines, just like this. And then I want you to draw a polyline, kind of like right over here. Okay, we're gonna do a kind of a zoom extent so that we can see both of those, all right? So we find the offset under this modify panel, and it's over here on the bottom, kind of in the same row that, or the same column that the erase command is. There's your offset. Remember the alias is O, so you can just type that in very nicely. When we do offset, the first thing it's going to ask you to do is specify an offset distance. Now you have some other options here, through, which is going to generate a through point for you. You can erase the original object, okay, which most people wouldn't do, or you can have it drop on a different layer, and we haven't talked about layers yet, so we'll skip that one. So what I'm going to do is give it a distance, okay? So I'm going to come here, give it a distance. Don't make it too big. Let's make it like maybe 0.75, something like that, or 1 unit. So I'm going to hit enter. So you come up here and you pick the object, and then you show it the side, pick the object, and then show it the side by picking a side, and then pick an object and show it the side. And when you're done, you can just hit enter. Is everybody getting that to execute for them? Any questions on that?
No.
All right, now what do you notice up here that's happening? Those are going to have to be trimmed off. Does everybody see that? That's not a real good thing right there. And these are going to have to be extended probably because they're not going sharp for me. Watch what happens when we get to the polyline. Now, what's cool about the offset is the last offset distance that you used, it will remember. So notice I typed in 7.5. I'm going to beef that up a little bit because mine's really small. So I'm going to make that 2. When I select my polyline, notice when it offsets it, what it does, it creates those corners real sharp for me. So I don't have to go in and do a secondary trim or extend kind of thing. It does that for me. You guys getting that to work for you?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is again, these distances are measured perpendicular, so these objects are nice and parallel to each other. If you're doing like floor plans or something, this is just a real quick way of laying these out. I'll tell you one thing though I don't like about offset. Let's say I wanted to offset this side 5 units and this side 3 units. I would have to offset the first one, get out of the command, back into it, set the distance, and then do another offset. I've used different programs, one for instance called MicroStation, which allows you to actually create or change the distance while you're in the same command, so you don't have to get out of it and back into it. So I kind of wish AutoCAD did that, because that's kind of if you're changing offset values a lot, then that's not a very good thing. All right, let's draw a circle. Okay, I'm going to draw a circle right here, and we'll offset that circle, and notice what will happen with that. So when we go back into our offset command, just select your, just accept the default or change the value, whatever you want it to be, and just select your circle, show it the side, select the circle, show it the side, and notice these are nice and concentric. So again, what that means when I say concentric, if I click on that one, you notice where his center point is. They all have the same center point, so they're all sitting right in there. So arcs do work the same way. So would ellipses. So basically, all objects are going to be either like line-based type objects or arc or circle type based objects. Okay. All right. So let's try this now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw a circle, let's say right there. Okay, kind of between those two lines. So let's say I want to offset this polyline so that it passes through the center of the circle. But because of the way I drew both of those objects, I have no idea what that distance is perpendicularly measured from this object to the center of that circle. Well, I can let AutoCAD find that for me. So if I go into the offset command, I use this option called through, select the object, and then notice it drags right with you. So I'm going to hit a shift right click, grab the center, select the center point, and what it did is it measured that distance for me, and it made it exactly through that point for me. So you either know the exact distance, or you can use that through point option to get your exact distance, one of the two. Okay, any questions on that? You guys seeing how that works? It's going to be a pretty powerful command. And again, that's one of those commands every time you draft, you use offset a couple times. I would almost say that. All right, so I got one more. We're running in great time here. It's called the fillet command. Let me run over here real quick. And I'm going to clean this up. So the command fillet, this is a great command. So it's going to do basically 3 things in one for me. But the major thing it does is what's called a fillet. Okay. So a classic fillet is where you have a line that comes up, and let's say maybe a line down like that. We've already seen this in the rectangle command, but what it does is it tends to place an arc between those, and then it'll trim those guys out. So if you have it set to a trim mode, what it's going to do is it's going to get rid of that piece, and it's going to get rid of this piece. And this arc that you're seeing here is a tangent arc, okay? Not like I've drawn it. So that's a fillet. So what we have to do is we have to supply for it a radius value. So you're going to give it a radius of some value, and it's going to do the fillet. Now, if you put the radius of 0 in, what it's going to do is one of 2 things. And this is really, again, very powerful. So if you have this going on, okay, and you put a 0 radius in, what it will do is it'll extend the one up to the other, okay, until they go sharp. If you have this happening with a 0 radius, what it will do is it will trim it like this. So the fillet is actually 3 commands in one. It is a true fillet, an extend, or a trim. Okay, so let's take a look at this one, because this is one of my major commands that I use a lot. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to erase everything we see here. Erase all and enter twice. Okay, and I'm going to follow that up with a zoom extends, or zoom all. Excuse me. All right. So I'm going to draw a couple of objects here. I'm going to draw a line up like this, and then down like that. And then I'm going to do another line here. Let's see, like this. And I'm going to do another line over here like this. Okay. Now, this will work with polylines, it'll work with lines, it'll work with arcs, it'll work with circles. So you can fillet a circle to a circle to a line. So you can do a lot of fillet types of things. So I'm just happening to use lines because it's simple. All right, the alias for fillet is also really nice. It's F. So if you want to remember that, that's cool. We find it also over in the modified panel right there, right in the middle. Go ahead and go to fillet. So it has some options. Select the first object, or undo, or polyline, or radius, or trim, or multiple. So we're going to go to radius first, because you always want to spec a radius out first. So it'll have a radius in there. Usually it's going to be 0 by default. But let's put a value in there, let's say a 1. So we're going to put 1 in here. So then we just come up and select the first line, the second line. Notice when you touch that second line, it's going to show you what it's going to do, how it's going to execute it. If you don't like it, you can select another one and it would do the same thing on something else. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one, left click, and there's my fillet. So what it did was it placed a tangent arc in, tangent between that object and that object. It's using a radius of 1 inch, and it added the arc object. Okay, that's highly powerful. We never need to use the arc command again. This command basically just completely negates that arc command. All right, so here's what will happen if we use this as a trimmer and extend. So we're going to go back into the fillet command. And notice the last radius that you use, it's going to use again. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this radius equal to 0. I'm going to go to radius, set it equal to 0. Now you have to keep in mind, between 2 objects, what you select is what it's going to keep. So I'm going to trim these 2 guys off. So I'm going to select this guy first and this guy second. Notice if I select that guy second, he'll keep it, but if I come down here and hit that one, it's going to keep that one. So maybe I will. I'll just keep that one. So notice what it did is it trimmed the two based on what I selected. Did you guys get that one to work? So we were able to do a trim with the fillet command. That's just really a beautiful example of how that works. Is that working for everybody?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so we're gonna do the extend now. Okay, so if I go back into the fillet, my radius is 0. Now I can select that guy, and he extends them. So fillet, trim, extend. I use this command all the time. This is one of my favorite commands. It's highly powerful. You'll see that it's going to be one of your best friends. You're going to use it. You're going to use it a lot. Any questions on that?
Yeah, can you extend that one more time?
Absolutely. So I'm going to undo what I've got. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to go into the fillet. Make sure that your radius is set to 0, okay? So mine's already set to 0, so I don't have to do anything. But if it isn't set to 0, make sure you go to the radius option there, set it to 0, and then you can select this guy and that guy, okay? Is that working?
Hold on, let me just try that again.
Anybody else troubles with it?
Yeah, I'm still having trouble
Got
with
it?
that.
Did you get it, Nick?
No, I didn't actually.
Is it not executing or is it?
I can't extend it. Like I can set the radius back to 0, but
Well, after you set the radius, and you got to select the two objects. Are you
Right.
doing that?
okay, so you go to trim, right?
When you're going to trim, you're going to fillet.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, the idea is you're doing an extend and a trim within the fillet command. There's another command up here called trim, but that's not what we're doing. Okay.
Okay.
We're doing the trim and or extend while we're actually using the fillet command.
Okay.
Yes, that's probably why it wasn't working for you. Well, I'll talk about that command in a little bit later, not today. Is it working now?
So it's too large.
You've got a radius then. Set your radius to 0.
Okay.
Go into the fillet, select radius.
Oh yeah, there is a radius.
Yeah, there's a radius value, right? That's why it's set too
got
large.
set up to 2.1.
Yeah, that's why it wasn't working.
Okay.
Set it to 0, and then now try it. It'll work fine, guarantee it.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Did it
I don't
work?
know how the radius went to 2.1. I just reset it to 0.
Did it work now?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. All right. Let me show you a couple other things, and then we can get you guys out of here. So under fillet, notice that there is what's called a trim mode. Okay. So what I want you to do is go to the trim mode, and notice the trim mode is turned on to be a trim. Okay. So if we set it to no trim, it won't trim as it does its fillet. So when I go into a radius now, set my radius to 1, if I come and select this object and that object, notice what it did is it put my arc in there, but it didn't trim that guy off, and it didn't trim that guy off. So that's what's called a no trim mode. So be aware of that when you turn that mode off, like I just did, or changed it, it's going to stay on forever. Okay. I would say that most of the time you want trim turned on. So just so that you guys, if you're going to play with this at home, or you're going to want to work with this, let's go ahead and turn it back on right now. Go to the trim mode and turn it back to a trim, because that makes a whole lot more sense than when I do this. It does that. That's what you're going to use probably 80% of the time. Okay. You guys with me? Let's try one more option. The polyline option, it's not probably a really great option, but let's go ahead and we'll draw a polyline. Just draw a polyline with some vertexes in it. Don't worry about what it looks like so much. So we can fillet that. You can either fillet them one at a time, or you can fillet them all at the same time using the polyline option. So if I go into the fillet, make sure your radius is set to a value such as maybe 1. Go down here to the polyline, and then just select the polyline. And notice when you do that, it'll place a radius for you at every vertex that it can. Again, probably not highly useful, but it could be something that you might want to take a look at, okay? So we covered everything I wanted to. The only one I didn't get to today, and it's not that important, is what we call the chamfer. And I can revisit some of this on Wednesday because we're going to have plenty of time. So I'm also going to be giving you another assignment. So you're going to have time to be working on that assignment too. I would imagine most of you be able to knock that out, finish it, and then we'll get started on that assignment 3. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and